The future has arrived. As the world and humanity itself moves faster and faster into unimaginable possibilities, old institutions that built connection and shaped our sense of meaning are falling by the wayside. In their wake, profound questions about ethics, our purpose, and spirituality demand new answers. Join your host, Scott Mason, in Season 2 of the Purpose Highway podcast. We will explore how these social changes will revolutionize our society. We will learn how they impact our own search for connection and meaning. And we will hear stories of influencers whose lives have had radical change from the inside and found profound connection to others and themselves through a new definition of meaning. The future has arrived. Are you ready?
When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's ITSNOLA.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is. Hello, everybody. It's Scott Mason revving up for another race down the Purpose Highway. And sitting next to me in the front seat today is Stephen Gilman. Stephen is a STEAM and social emotional learning educator. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what STEAM is later in the show for anyone who doesn't know. He has established over 100 makerspaces in schools nationwide where students learn coding, robotics, 3D design, and engineering through hands-on creative projects. He's a father, a former New York City public school teacher, and a school founder, veteran, and activist for student-centered learning that fosters joyful, autonomous, and inventive lifetime learners from the earliest of ages. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott. It's so good to be here with you.
It's great to have you. So let's start by just recapping some of the themes of the show so that anyone who might be listening or watching for the first time understands the basis of a lot of the conversation that we have. We are in the middle of a historic transition, not just here in the United States where this is being recorded, but around the world. I call it the silent revolution, and it's a revolution of thinking about the ways that people connect with each other with regards to fundamental issues that relate to the human heart, such as spirituality, ethics, and purpose. The historic institutions that have helped people search for those types of meaning are in decline, and we're entering a new world where purpose, spirituality, and ethics are going to mean something else altogether. In addition, this is being recorded in January of 2022, during what I'm hoping, God knows, is towards the end of a lengthy COVID pandemic. It's brought a lot of pain and social maladjustment. People have been locked up, isolated, kept apart from each other for years at this point. It's fed into something that I call the secret plague. And that plague isn't viral. That plague is alienation, separation from each other as spirits that was already happening substantially before this pandemic hit, but that this pandemic has obviously dramatically accelerated. And the decline of the historical institutions that has united us in these meaningful connections has only made the secret plague worse. There are two other themes that have emerged as this season of Scott Mason's Purpose Highway has proceeded. And they are themes that I did not anticipate coming into the show, but they're themes that have been fundamental. The first, climate change. This show was not intended to be about climate change. I care about climate change. It had nothing to do with the initial objectives that I had for putting out the message of this show. Yet, as of this recording, at least 3/4 of the guests, no matter what they're talking about, no matter what their discipline is, they've managed to somehow bring climate change into the discussion. I give in. The world wants me to talk about climate change. Okay, we're going to be here talking about climate change today, Stephen, because I actually believe that what you're doing has something to do with that.
Yes, yes.
In addition, the decline in these historical religious institutions.
Yeah.
As a guest by the name of Phil Zuckerman, who studies this for a living, has indicated, this is not just a Western world phenomenon. It's happening in parts of Asia. It's happening in the Middle East. It's happening in South America. And we don't know where else it's going to be happening too. Some of the guests, including a recent one we had by the name of Bryant Bashand, talked about this in a lot of detail as he discussed, and as actually an ethicist by the name of Chris Gilbert talked about this too. When there are major social, cultural changes in a society, leadership can embrace it. Leadership can hold on to old paradigms. But change still happens. Chris Gilbert, the ethicist, who wrote a great book by the name of The Noble Edge, described it in terms of ethical capacity that accompanies paradigm changes in the world. Either the existing spiritual orders or ethical guardians build additional capacity to deal with these changes, or they fall down the ethical ladder into a lower place and lose credibility with the masses. Leadership, capacity, the future are the themes, among others, that we intend to delve in significantly during our time together today. Thank you. As I go through all of that, Stephen, it's important for anyone who hasn't heard this show before or who's listening for the first time to have some understanding of why we're asking these questions and how it relates to you. Now, in our pre-show prep, you and I played a little game that I like to play with every guest, and that is name your Greek mythological avatar. And being the genius that you are, I had one ready to just throw at you in the event that you didn't have one, but I should have known better. You pulled one out on your own. Who was it? Tell us why that avatar speaks to you.
Oh, such a great question. And that my avatar is Prometheus. It's aspirational. And it's something that maybe it's a character in our human stories that, I may aspire to as more than I live up to, certainly. So, but why? I think Prometheus was a god who stole fire from the other gods and gave it to humans. And there was a price for what he did. And I think his consideration perhaps of the price he was going to pay or likely to pay by stealing that fire and giving it to humans was something that maybe is in the balance for us today. But the original reason is that he wanted to turn over what may be considered the original technology, fire being a tool that allows humans to create other tools. And we could look at that as something that forges objects and machines and also powers them. So fire literally is at the heart of most modern technology. And I think that and Prometheus was punished by the gods, was, I think, chained to a rock with a bird eating out his liver every day for the rest of his existence. And so there is there is a promise and a warning in that story. I subscribe to some sort of Jungian ideas or the construction of ideas. I think that there was a lot there that Jung had to say about what ideas and constructs and concepts and ideas and stories may occur sort of in humans sort of innately, or the stories that are given to them by culture through culture are just as powerful. But the story here, I think, in its importance is that we have this immense power now given to us by the universe, and which is to make tools, and those tools make other things. And those tools can have a positive impact on our society and our planet, or they can be very, very detrimental. And so I appreciate that you are on a years-long topic here of climate change. And this is something that weaves together all of the conversations that you have. And because I think why that's important is that we are making decisions on a daily basis. And every one of us is at a fork in the roads. Should we do this or that? And will that positively affect people and planet or not? And I work with children. And so that in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years will be us, and they will be in our jobs, and they will have our responsibilities. And a lot of times we may think of them as only needing to be entertained or to be fed or controlled, but if we can think of them as the humans that will take that fire, and what is our responsibility to them to hand over that tool and to teach them how to properly use technology. And so that's what we do. And that's what I think informs, our work in education and in STEM or STEAM, is to not only to teach kids how to use technology, but to use it so that it creates a future for all that is more sustainable and more inclusive. And do all people have the opportunities that all of us deserve to have access to? And are we working in, as you were saying earlier, do we have the ethical capacity and the leadership capacity to develop tools that do sustain us and do include all of us equally? That's the challenge before us. And I think that's, and there's a dark side of that, is I think Mary Shelley's the subtitle of Frankenstein was something, I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was a warning it was a warning about the Promethean story. It was like, you can do extraordinary things with technology, but be careful, because they could create monsters that could come and just wreck our world. And that's I think a warning about technology that's inherent to the Frankenstein story that doesn't harken back to the story about Prometheus. So Prometheus is something that it's a mythological story that challenges me, and that I think it holds out a challenge for our society to live up to.
There was so much inside of what you said. It's difficult to even know where to take it, but I'll do my best to dive in. Please, let's pray that there's a lot of water in the pool so my head doesn't crack on the bottom. First of all, an interesting thing about the Prometheus story is that Prometheus was from a generation of gods that was prior to the Olympians. And humans themselves were, as one might imagine, created by the Olympian gods. Although the myths vary on this. In some myths, the chief god Zeus was ultimately the creator of humanity. In other versions, actually, the task was assigned to Prometheus. Prometheus literally means foresight. It means we have the power within us to anticipate. And I think about everything that you just said, but the meaning of Prometheus itself and the relationship of foresight to children. Does that trigger anything in you?
Absolutely. And I think, I sort of look for how stories are connected, and where they connect in our brains. And there's something about, like where did the Greek myths come from, and what sort of things inside of human beings did they arise from? And it might be very similar to like what would be in the Jewish tradition or the Christian faith and the stories there. It's like, we're going to make this thing. We're going to make you and a thing that you live in, and then we're going to give you the responsibility to live in it correctly. Mm-hmm. And you have that responsibility. You have the free will, and that story occurs in so many cultures, and it just is kind of repeated over and over and over. And I might say, because I don't know what's up there, or I can't say, I don't have evidence of where I came from necessarily, or where I'm gonna be in 1,000 years, but I do think that the universe we do come from the universe, and we are literally forged from stars and the material of the universe, and we will be back in the universe in some other form. And so what has the universe given us, and what is our responsibility here on Earth? And so we talk about, if you're talking about what is just sort of unpacking what life is like in a post-religion world. And, I hope my dad's not listening. He's a missionary for 45 years to India, and his belief in what he does is started a fire in me that I pursue now. And I'm pursuing my own path, but I believe something too, and that drives what I do. But I do believe that we are entering into a world, as you were saying earlier, where people are very more closely looking at some of the traditions and stories and beliefs that were handed to them, and maybe questioning them, and starting to maybe trying to pin down something that is more tangible for them in their lives. And that could be completely related to or within their current or future religious practices. But people are yearning to kind of find out for themselves. And that spiritual quest that I think all of us are on right now is, so much different than 100 years ago or 500 years ago when the church or some other major entity just says, here it is, this is the playbook, see you at the other end. And it's all going to be just fine. And that's not good enough for people anymore. And I think in particular, this generation of kids there's this fire hose of media and content, and this always on dynamic, which I'm not going to be one that is, I'm not your guy who's going to be the warning of the social media issues and things like that. I'm going to be the guy who says we have to teach these kids how to take a hold of this technology and do with it the things that they deserve as humans and this planet requires. To literally save us. My favorite movie is The Matrix, and don't tell anybody I haven't watched the latest Matrix movie. I heard it didn't get great reviews, so I'm afraid to watch it.
Tune in.
Yeah, and in fact, just Matrix 1 is really the thing I'm referring to there. But I think there's an interesting idea there that we used to when we held design workshops for teachers. I used to, at the sign-in sheet up at the front of the room, I'd have a bowl. I'd put hot tamales in the bowl, and those hot tamales look, if you remember, just like the red pill that Morpheus offered.
I love.
Keanu Reeves. So it was like, actually, we don't have any blue pills. All we have is red pills for you. And so, it's a hot tamale. But as you come into this workshop on how we can work with kids, take the red pill. And we are going to go down the rabbit hole. And we're going to see how this thing really is constructed. How is that? Kids are going to build this world, but they have to understand the technology and the media that they're working with and learn to create with it.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that last part of what you said as the show episode goes on. And that was incredible. I do want to point out a couple of things. A, the theme of Prometheus and fire keeps recurring. I'm a big advocate of finding an avatar for yourself in mythology, because subconsciously, as you indicated when you talked about Jung earlier, there is a reason why we're attracted to these particular avatars. They speak to us on multiple levels. The Greek myths didn't just come out of nowhere because people were bored and had nothing else to do. Right. Heaven knows they did. And you talked about the inner fire that represents passion that is externalized through the building of technology. You also talked about the act of building something. Prometheus literally built the human form from clay. And so it is fascinating to me that we are discussing all of this within the context of this particular story. Also, the idea, going back again, of Prometheus's name meaning foresight or forethought. Forethought involves an assessment of risks and a consideration of the outcome. One thing that I would like to hear more about from you is why you feel that that is relevant in the technology space. Because let's face it, the technology space right now is not famed in the eyes of the general public for its concern, for its impact on the future. Where did your spin, where did your sudden, where did this responsibility concern come from in a space that's surrounded by people who don't seem to care?
Yeah, wow. If we had an adequate answer to that question, I think we'd be much further along in our healthy advancement as a species. But let me take a shot at it. I think that the traditional way of working, and that's what we do when we get out of high school and get out of college. Whatever that general path of education is, we get into the workforce and we work for the rest of our lives until we retire or fall over dead. And I think I think there's got to be a fundamental way that we change our relationship and perspective of work. And I do think this idea of forethought, as you point back to that Promethean story, is, are you doing something that somebody handed to you and said was okay? And you should just go ahead and do that. Go ahead and create this account or write this software or build this machine or move your company into this country or occupy this space and control this spot for whom and, by whose authority and permission and rights. And so I think that if there's an idea that we could sort of, if we could just learn as a species to sort of step back and say, we're not doing this because somebody just put this out here for us to do, whether it was our boss or whether it was some tycoon entrepreneur who said, get onto this platform and load your picture and connect all your family. And, 20 years later, we have a stolen election in the strongest democracy in the world. And so and by the way, I'm not saying there was a stolen election, but I'm saying there was, what I should back up and say was there is a extremely messed with election process in a free democracy, and a perception on the back end that it was stolen. And what happened, through social media didn't serve any of us, and certainly didn't serve the future of free and open societies. And so just maybe the foresight that you're saying is the forethought. I think that you're saying is just pause for a second and saying, is what I'm being asked to do, is what I'm asked to join or to be part of or to accomplish, is that sound ethically? And according to whose ethics? I think a good example is something that's occurring in artificial intelligence with self-driving cars, and it's a little bit of that trolley problem. That if the trolley is in, my son and I were talking about it. I have a 15-year-old who's studying some of this in his high school right now, but it's that idea of, if you've got a switch and the trolley is going to go and hit one person or hit 5 people, do you pull the switch and divert it so it just kills one person? And that's an ethical dilemma that none of us want to answer. Yeah. But that is, in fact, somebody somewhere, in fact, lots of people and lots of money is being poured into the software that will make that decision for us. Yeah. When the car sees that there is a baby stroller on that side of the street and a couple of teenagers walking on that side of the street and a group of pedestrians in the next block, what does it do if it's running out of control or whatever? So that the level of technology that we're getting into requires us to have that forethought to say the ethics are loaded into this operation system. They no longer exist on Friday night or Sunday morning or Saturday evening. It's not where you go off to get your enrichment of morality. We have to live our true ethics and morality as we advance into an age that has us as we are all the builders of this content and the shapers of its future. And so that's why I think that for me, why that Prometheus story is so provocative, is that here is fire, and you can literally power your world with it, or you can destroy it. What will you do and how? And that's why we're in the education game. I would much rather be working with 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds than have to try to, help some 30-year-old figure this out in church, or a young person entering the workforce try to figure this out for the first time. I think K-12 is where we need to take a serious look at how to challenge our kids with the questions that they're going to have for the rest of their lives.
One last metaphor that I'm going to extract for now from the Prometheus story. Prometheus represents, by giving humanity fire, a shift in their own ability to control their destiny. And by the way, you mentioned that in passing a few minutes ago when you talked about what choices are you going to make about your life? Are you going to just do what someone is telling you, some tycoon that you work for, or are you going to behave according to a particular ethical code? Something makes me suspect that on a personal level, the idea of leaving behind a world where you didn't have personal autonomy, particularly in the professional space, and creating something on your own just might speak to you. Stephen, tell us a little bit about your background and how MakerState came into existence.
Wow. Okay. I think it goes back to my school and my experience at home. Like I said, my dad was a missionary, and he really worked mostly in the U.S. to fund and support teams in largely India to share the Christian message. And they were doing a lot of other things like digging wells and building health clinics and schools and everything. But it was all based around the sharing of Christianity and the intentful conversions of people of India. And so while I have, significantly sort of gone my own route as far as the belief systems, I did sit around the dinner table every night. And my dad came home, and my dad and my mom were working very closely together as a partnership. And they would sit around and share with me and my brother the struggles that they had that day, and the wins and the losses, and literally, as I believe what I might call a social impact entrepreneur. Again, not what my own sort of particular beliefs are, but my dad believes it, and he believes that it will help people. And I share an idea that having some type of belief like that that's powerful for you is hopefully what you can draw from to fuel your existence and what you're doing in the world. And so I do still share many of my dad's beliefs, especially about justice and human potential and equality of opportunity and the free will and humans' right to pursue what is their greatest purpose and potential. And so that really motivated me. At the same time, I was in a succession of schools over my young days. I don't know, a good number of schools, and 5, 6, 7 schools that I went to, I think at least during my K-12 years. We moved around a bit, and most of those schools were religious schools. And they spent a lot of time trying to kind of get me to sort of believe a certain thing and think a certain way, and maybe not as much time on math and English and that kind of thing as I might have hoped if I could have rewound the experience.
Right.
And so, but I came to realize there, I think I came to have sort of a burning desire I wanted to know, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to collaborate, and I wanted to create and have new ideas and synthesize ideas. If you're looking at that Bloom's taxonomy, it's like the knowledge is really just the base level. And then what you have succeeding up in there is, do you know the thing? Can you summarize it? Can you combine two ideas? Can you create and synthesize two ideas to make something entirely new? Mm-hmm. And I yearned for that ability and that opportunity to create. And I think that, there's a Daniel Pink and a bunch of other people have said we're essentially right brain creatures, I think. And that we do operate, many people operate off of strong left brain sort of skill, abilities and tendencies. But I think essentially we are a creative species, and we are a tool making species. And that's what separates us from all other organisms on the planet. And with that is that experience is, what are we doing with kids that gives them the most ability to learn in a way that has them at the center of their learning, where it's not listening to the teacher at the front of the room lecturing so that they can memorize, the students can memorize and spit it all back on a test on Friday or in June for a state exam. That's kind of the structure that I came up in. So when I pursued education policy in school, and I got into education work as soon as I could, becoming a public school teacher in New York City, and started in Harlem in 2000, and later starting an Outward Bound public high school in the Bronx. Wow. Years later, then going on to start MakerSpaces as a teacher after school. And then I realized that my students loved the makerspaces after school. They liked showing up at that club and building robots and designing games and coding, and more than the agenda that I had for them during the day, which was given to me essentially by the state. And I tried to make that as fun and exciting as possible. And I love those subjects. But I realized that the true learning and the purpose and the possibility of a single human being really, you have to arrive at that through that person being an agent and practicing their agency and getting to know the impact of their decisions from a very young age. And what is the decision of me leaving him out of this group? What would be the implications of me asking her for best practice? What would it hurt me at all to ask if I didn't understand? And seek someone's help. And these are just things that, a lot of psychologists or educators might refer to as social emotional learning or executive functioning. And we do concentrate on those skill sets. And, but these are things that I think, if looking back at my schooling and my youth experience, if I'm informed a little bit about if I could have waved my wand and made the experience, that's what I would have made it. I would have put me more in charge of my own learning. And so every day there's probably a week that doesn't go by where we're creating coursework where we're not trying to put students at the center of their experience and give them that power of creation, collaboration, problem solving. I got to show you one thing, Scott. I just have this because we're issuing our badges for the spring semester, and these are just some badges that our students earn badges in the program. And this bottom row here is a row of social emotional learning badges that they earn for some skills that we think are important. Self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship building, and that kind of thing. But this one right here there's a little bit of Prometheus right there. There's a fire with a heart in it, right? And
wow.
And that's fiero, and that's it's an Italian word for pride.
Yeah.
And that fiero moment it's victory after struggle.
Yeah.
So you fail, but you try.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a certain point, after you try to code that game, or you try to design it and print that 3D object, or you tried to build that robot that can navigate a maze and accomplish an objective, and you've tried it over and over and over, and it's all play-based, so you're engaged, it's fun, but you're struggling and you're not getting it right. But you finally accomplish that little objective that you had in front of you, and the hands go up, and it's a victory moment. And that's what we call that fiero moment. And we have a badge that's called First Fiero. So that's a moment where one of our instructors, our Maker fellow instructors, where if we can, and we work with the kids to recognize that between each other is more valid. And when anybody recognizes that any one of us had a Fiero moment, out comes that badge. That's your first Fiero. And we want to give kids opportunities to feel that Fiero. What does it feel like after you didn't comply? You didn't do the assignment that you were told, and you filled in the blank and turned it in and never thought about it again. You memorized it, you spit it back out, and then you went on to the next thing that you're soon going to forget as well. What is that moment where you learned that you could accomplish something that you thought that you couldn't do, maybe even that you feared a moment or a day or a year before, but now you've accomplished that. And I believe that's a fire. Speaking of that Prometheus, mm-hmm. that burns and that can burn inside of every human, but you have to spark it, and you have to gently nurture it, and you have to fan it and let it grow inside of a person. And I believe once you set that flame off in a student, or help a student to realize that fire, then they're going to go into the rest of their lives, their schoolwork, their personal lives, and their career, carrying that flame forward.
The secret plague. I want to talk about that for a minute in light of everything that you just said. The secret plague, which is that sense of alienation from connection. When I think of and read about the decline in religiosity and decline in civic engagement across the board, there's been a massive amount of research, not just with religion, but look at organizations, everything from Toastmasters to the Rotary Club, to the Lions Club, to the Masons, to a whole other host of civic institutions that drove community. Engagement in those is plummeting. It's plummeting. And a lot of what people are, and engagement in workplaces, particularly large organizations, down. That's why a lot of initiatives that are around, superficial things that you and I have talked about privately, playing, adding little ping pong tables to the workplace, or snack bars, which are superficial sops that may make people feel better in a second, but that's not really about what engages people. The one word that I have used, or the one word, actually two words that I've heard used to describe this phenomenon, which accelerates the younger and younger you look at demographics in our culture, is apathy, cynicism. Apathy, cynicism, abet the secret plague. What you've just spoken about is relating to pushing outside of the comfort zone, moving away from the things that are easy, like scrolling on certain social media sites that I won't name because I'm on them. moving away from from binge watching that umpteenth series on Netflix or whatever other television platform, and truly pushing to find that fire. But do you think that as a culture, we're capable of it? There is an undercurrent of optimism that I'm hearing in your voice about the very demographics that we're seeing the most cynicism and pessimism in. Where is this optimism even coming from? Do you think it's justified, Stephen?
Absolutely. I absolutely think so. And, you know, the potential of every human being is so just immense. And, we can't imagine what we will create as a species. And this time that we're in seems, and it is in so many ways, dire. We are suffering from a global pandemic, and we, our prayers and well wishes go out to everyone who's suffered from it, and it continues to suffer from it. It has, and we, in this very privileged, affluent society that we live in New York City, I walk out on my block, and most of the stores on my block are closed. And so it has burned through our society and continues to wreak havoc. And we see the ongoing. I can't help but read the articles about the continuing fallout and ripples of the January 6th attack. And that is something that, depending on where you're at, is either a serious crack in our free democracy, or the beginning of a necessary revolution, or many other things that could be conceived about that time. And but I think what we can see is that some of the old things that we used to maybe rely on, like the U.S. Constitution, that it's a great document. Most other free democracies were founded using that document. Yeah. And some of the inventions and corporations that exist in the United States. I mean, amazing inventions of flight and power, and just across every category. It's astounding what we've been able to do just in this country and as a species around the world. But I think we're coming to this moment with part of this, I think, an element to addressing this secret plague, I believe, is that we realize that the Constitution doesn't run the government. We use the Constitution as a tool. We run the government, and it's not. We're not run by. We do not have to let corporations be run by profit and a board that is looking at shareholder interest only. Or maybe we could reimagine what shareholder interest is, and to include people and planet in addition to profit. And I think I believe we're on a cusp where, as a society, where we're going to see that we're kind of in this together, and we're going to survive and thrive together, or we're going to continue to fray and pull apart. And I believe that the advance of technology, I think, is going to make that more and more readily apparent, where we can either use this to take advantage of each other, or we can use this to bring us into more inclusive opportunities where everyone has a voice and a choice. And that's to me why we've got to reach the youngest generation, where I used to work with I used to teach at the high school level, and I taught at the middle school level, and now we work primarily at the elementary school level with MakerState and in a makerspace setting, working on coding, robotics, 3D design, and that kind of thing. And it used to be kind of funny to me that, like, you can, at the high school level, the students are kind of harder to motivate because they're older, they're a little bit tired. School probably shouldn't start so soon. And, but they have more intellectual capacity. And so you can do more sophisticated things, learning experiences with high school students. Well, on the flip end of that, down on the elementary level, the students don't quite have all the brain power and skills as the older students do, but they'll do basically anything you put in front of them. So if you say, we're building a game today, or we're building a robot, or you're going to design and print this 3D artifact, they're like, okay, let's go. And so I think working with that age group to kind of like bake in some values there that are not related to a religion or a political philosophy, but they are related to inclusiveness and sustainability. And I think we can help kids to arrive at why those values are important. And I guess maybe one of the things that makes me most hopeful is that whatever we're doing with first graders, second graders, third graders, that is going to have an impact in just a few years. So whatever mistakes our generation is making, we can turn that by working with our youngest members of our society to make better choices that include more justice, more sustainability. That's what probably gives me the most hope.
What does STEAM stand for, by the way?
Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And the more popular acronym is STEM, but STEAM includes the arts. And we, in the way, one of the ways that we include the arts is, we were making art objects, but I think most of the way our approach to STEAM learning is that kids are being asked to create something every day. And that creative brain that is something that you're going to be asked for in the workplace and the rest of your school career and the workplace. And it also is required out in the community as well, and in your personal lives and your relationships. And so that art component of it, I think, is very important. We can have all the technology that we want to have, but if students are not able to have, what we might is called divergent thinking, the ability to, we're not just going to engineer this according to the blueprint. We're going to do this so this tool works reliably, but we're going to think imaginatively so that this tool works better and better and better.
Which, by the way, gets back to climate change. Do you think that creates possibilities for solving massive problems like that?
I absolutely agree. And we have to, awareness is often the first step in order to, before growth. And so we really have to, find better ways that we can have a shared awareness of what this challenge is. So I'm seeking that. And I think that next step is to give kids better tools for solving this problem. I think that, one of the things that why we use the MakerSpace approach to learning and not standard traditional academic approaches to learning is because we don't know what tools you're going to have in your MakerSpace or in your workplace 10 years from now. We don't know what challenges or problems you're going to have in your workplace. But you have to, as a human being in this 21st century, be able to walk into a room and avail yourself of the resources, quickly identify the problem, and solve it in a way that is just and productive and inclusive and sustainable. And so the ability to kind of do that in real time is a MakerSpace approach to learning. And so I have these tools, I have these resources and materials, I have these collaborators, there are these expertise in the room. We do have means of seeking other materials and resources outside of the room. And that's an approach to learning that I wish, to impart and foster within all kids. When I was a boy, I think that's something that both my mom and my dad, I think were just, they had that mentality. And maybe I'm trying to kind of figure out a way to reverse engineer that. They would literally, my mom or my dad would walk into a room, no matter what the room was. And they would it was like they scanned it. Wow. And they were like, what needs to be done here? Right. Who needs help? How can I be of service to what's going on in this room? And most of the time it was not their agenda. It was not their goal, but it might've been my mom might've walked into a gathering of people, a dinner party or something. And she would go right to where she could help and help set up and be of service. And my dad had the same approach to the work that he did. And so what is it that we can impart into kids to say, I'm not just here for my own agenda. How can I contribute to what's going on in this room or what's going on in this community? How can I quickly identify what the needs of this community are and meaningfully join in problem solving around what the community is experiencing? And now, like it or not, we're in a global community with big global problems like climate change. And there is something to be done. And some scientists might say, that we're so far advanced that there's going to be repercussions that we can't reverse. But there are things that we can do to slow down this process and to check it so that it doesn't completely ruin us. And then I believe one of the things when you look at sort of the melting Arctic ice shelves, and you can clearly see with just a cursory examination of even satellite photography or the volume mass loss year by year of the Arctic ice, it's not deniable, to anyone, right? If you're looking at it face to face,
Right.
So I think that at that point, I think our reckoning with a problem like climate change, I think will sharpen us, kind of like that Stephen Covey sharpening the sword. Or sharpening the tool. It's an experience that gives you an ability to do everything else better. And so if we can turn and face this big global problem together, that's going to help us to solve every other challenge that comes our way or that we're currently existing. And that's, again, something that gives me great hope. This is a challenge. We can rise to the challenge.
It is a way of looking at the world in which there could be, through rising to the challenge, through uniting, dealing with the secret plague, maybe coming out the silent revolution for the better.
Yes.
Stephen, that was some powerful stuff. Anyone who cares about the future and is watching or listening to the show will want to know more about you and about MakerState. Where can they go?
They can Google MakerState. That's MakerState. And we are an in-school and after-school program. We operate camps and holiday programs and special events, but any way that we can work ourselves into a school and at any time of the day, we're working with students in all types of capacities. And so if you look us up, MakerState online, we're operating primarily in New York City. And we're working with so many schools and thousands of kids here in makerspaces all across New York City. But we've worked in San Francisco and New Orleans and Chicago and Boston. And we'd love to be helping you and your community to reach the highest potential of each of your children and your schools and your community. So that's how to find us. Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Stephen, it has been great taking a ride with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Scott. Keep the fire burning.
Thank you. And for everybody tuning in, if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review on Apple or a comment on YouTube. And I will see you next time for another ride down the Purpose Highway. When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's itsnola.com. NOLA.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is.